One late afternoon in Colorado, a doctor was driving home exhausted. Suddenly, he saw an SUV crash into a guardrail and plunge down the slope. He immediately pulled over, grabbed his first aid kit and ran toward it. Inside, a woman was trapped, gasping for air. With every ounce of strength left in him, he shattered the window and pulled her out just before the vehicle exploded behind them. But he had no idea that the woman he saved was a billionaire in the tech world, and that saving her life would pull him into an invisible storm, uncovering a secret that had never been revealed before. Before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching and subscribe so you don't miss out on great stories every day. By the time the sun slid down behind the high, jagged line of the Rockies, the light over Flagstaff Ridge had turned thin and tired. The air had that crisp, dry cold of Colorado evenings. In a gray sedan with a hospital parking sticker on the windshield, Marcus Hale kept both hands steady on the wheel. He had finished a long ER shift not even half an hour ago. His body carried the familiar heaviness that followed 12 hours on his feet. Knees slightly sore, shoulders tense, eyes dry and gritty, but his mind stayed alert in the way it always did after work. It was quiet in the car. He preferred it that way after his shifts. No radio, no podcasts. Just the hum of the engine, the soft rush of wind around the doors, and the distant sound of tires on pavement. As he rounded a long curve along Flagstaff Ridge, the guardrail on his right dropped away toward a steep rocky slope. Then he saw a sudden bright flash of light from somewhere below the road, followed by the sickening sound of metal hitting rock. The sound rolled up the slope, sharp and heavy at the same time, the kind of impact that made the air itself seem to jump. Marcus's foot hit the brake before he had time to think. The sedan slowed quickly, tires gripping the cold asphalt. The car behind him honked once, then also slowed as its driver saw the look on Marcus's face reflected in the rearview mirror. He pulled his car onto the narrow shoulder, hazard lights blinking orange in the dimness. His heart had already kicked up a notch, steady but faster, as his mind ran through possibilities. Car off the road, tumble, roll over, fuel leak, fire. He opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Other drivers were already getting out of their vehicles, drawn by the noise. Marcus joined them at the rail. At first he saw only rocks and scrub and a few twisted bushes. Then his eyes caught the gleam of metal halfway down the slope. A large SUV lay on its side, nose crumpled into a cluster of boulders. The body of the vehicle was a dark, expensive-looking color, black or deep silver, and its windows were spiderwebbed with cracks. A thin tongue of flame flickered from the front of the vehicle. Smoke rose in a gray column, carrying with it a harsh chemical smell. A moment later, a stronger gust of wind carried up the unmistakable scent of gasoline. The young man with the phone swore under his breath, "Man, that thing's gonna blow." Marcus's breathing slowed, then steadied even more. This was the place inside him that always woke up when something went wrong. Everything around him seemed to narrow into a clear, simple path. Someone needed help. He was here. "Someone call 911, I'm coming down," he said quietly. The man with the phone looked at him, startled. "Hey buddy, you can't look at that fire. You go down there, it's both of you. Just wait." "I called 911 already." "Good," Marcus said. "Tell them there's an adult female likely trapped. We may have a fuel leak." He didn't raise his voice. It was the same tone he used in the trauma bay when things got tight. He turned and jogged back to his sedan. His movements were quick, but not frantic. He popped the trunk and reached in for the small kit he kept there, a compact first aid bag, a flashlight and a sturdy multi-tool with a folding knife and glass breaker. He did not carry them expecting anything like this, but he carried them anyway. He clicked on the flashlight to make sure it worked. The beam spilled out bright and focused onto the gravel at his feet, then tossed the first aid kit strap over his shoulder and ran back to the guardrail. "Sir, please," the woman said, voice higher now. "You heard that guy. It could explode any second." "I know," Marcus said. He met her eyes just long enough for her to see he was calm. "But if someone's alive in there, they might not have any seconds left." He swung one leg over the rail, then the other. He lowered himself onto the loose dirt and scrub grass on the other side, feeling for stable footholds. For a split second he remembered climbing like this as a foster kid, scrambling down a hillside behind a group home to fetch a ball that had rolled too far. Back then no one had cared if he fell or not. This time, it was different. He angled his body sideways and began to descend. His shoes skidded once on small stones, but he crouched low, catching his balance with one gloved hand. The closer he came, the stronger the smell of gasoline grew. The fire at the front of the vehicle crackled and popped, small orange flames licking along the crushed hood, crawling toward the wheel well. He reached the side of the SUV and knelt beside it, shining the flashlight inside through a cracked window. A woman hung against the driver's side, pressed sideways by the twisted seatbelt. The SUV rested on its right side, so her body had turned with it. Long strands of dark hair stuck to the blood on her forehead. Her blouse, once neat and businesslike, was torn at the shoulder. Her face was pale under streaks of grime, and blood trickled from a cut near her hairline. Her chest rose and fell, uneven but present. "Ma'am," Marcus called, voice firm but gentle, "can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, but her eyes did not open. He shifted his light to find the seatbelt anchor. The buckle was wedged at an odd angle, jammed hard against the console. He grabbed at it with one hand, tried to press the release, but it did not give, not even a little. He moved around to the windshield. It was cracked all over but stayed mostly intact, the safety glass still clinging to its own webbing. The driver's side window, however, looked more promising, a network of cracks without any obvious hole. He pulled the multi-tool from his pocket and snapped out the glass breaker tip. Bracing himself as best he could on the sloped ground, he swung it hard against the glass. The first strike deepened the cracks, the second made the glass shudder. On the third, the window gave way, shattering inward with a crunching sound. He reached through the opening, careful to brush away the jagged fragments at the edge. His fingers found the seatbelt near her shoulder. He tugged once more at the buckle, just to be sure, but it remained immovable. "All right," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "We'll do it the hard way." He extended the knife blade on the multi-tool, slid it between the belt and her chest, and began to saw. His wrist started to ache, but he kept at it, the blade moving in short, strong strokes. The smell of smoke edged closer. Finally, the fabric gave way with a sharp snap. Her weight shifted suddenly into his arms. He set the knife aside and slid both arms under her shoulders, pulling her carefully toward the broken window. The space was tight. Her knee caught on the steering wheel, and he had to angle her just right, twisting his own torso awkwardly to free her leg. The muscles in his back protested, but he pushed through, inch by inch. "Hang on," he said quietly. Her head lolled against his chest. Up close, he could see she was not just any driver. Even in this state there was a kind of sharpness to her features, a defined jaw, neatly shaped eyebrows, the remnants of makeup worn for meetings and cameras. He had seen her face before, he realized, though it took a second to place it. Financial news, magazine covers, Madeline Grant, Grant Innovations, tech billionaire. It did not matter. Right now she was simply a patient. He got her fully free of the vehicle and shifted his grip, hooking one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. Her body felt limp, heavier than her frame suggested. He turned away from the SUV and started to climb, his feet digging into the dirt, boots scraping against rocks. The fire behind him hissed louder, and the heat pressed against his back like a physical shove. His breath came a little harder now, white in the cold air. He had taken only a few steps when a deep, ugly rumble came from the SUV. Marcus did not stop to look. Instinct took over. He threw himself sideways, twisting his body to shield Madeline as best he could. The fuel tank went up. A blast of hot air slammed into them, carrying shards of plastic and metal. The explosion roared through the narrow valley, bouncing off the rock walls. A wave of force knocked Marcus off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his shoulder taking most of the impact, his arms still wrapped around Madeline. Small fragments rained down around them, pinging against rocks, tearing tiny gouges in the dirt. Above them, at the guardrail, people screamed. Someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Another voice cried, "Call again, tell them it exploded." For a moment, all Marcus could hear was his own heartbeat pounding in his ears and the roar of the fire behind them. Then the sound faded to a lower, steadier crackle. He lifted his head. The SUV was fully engulfed now. Flames leapt high into the air, throwing off heat that he could feel even from this distance. He shifted slightly, careful not to jar her too much, and checked her breathing again. Still there, her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven increments. A faint wheeze sounded with each breath. "All right," he said, his voice low and sure, "we're still here, that's what counts." He lay there for a moment longer, letting the dizziness pass. Then he pushed himself up to his knees and started to move again, dragging and lifting her bit by bit up the slope toward the guardrail. Above them, the flashing lights of arriving emergency vehicles painted the world in red and blue. The paramedics came down with ropes and practiced caution, their boots finding footholds where his had slipped. They took over in that calm, brisk way that told Marcus they had seen many terrible things and planned to see many more and still keep moving. Female, mid-40s, restrained driver, Marcus reported as they secured her to the stretcher. Rollover collision, head impact, temporary loss of consciousness, shallow respirations. Possibly internal trauma. Seatbelt was jammed. I had to cut it. Got it, the lead paramedic said. He glanced at the burning SUV. You pick a good time to be a hero, Doc. Marcus shook his head. I just happened to be here. They lifted the stretcher carefully and began the slow climb back up. Marcus climbed alongside them, his legs burning by the time they reached the guardrail. People lined the edge of the road, watching wide-eyed. Some stepped back to give the paramedics room. Others stared at Marcus with a mixture of fear and admiration. Inside the ambulance, he climbed in beside the stretcher without hesitation. The doors shut behind him with a heavy thump, sealing them into a world of harsh white light and steady beeping. He slipped back into his usual role. He helped the paramedic attach monitoring leads, called out blood pressure readings, noted the sluggish reaction of pupils to light. The narrow space hummed with purposeful urgency. As the ambulance bounced along the road toward the hospital, the woman on the stretcher stirred. Her fingers flexed once, twice, then her right hand lifted, shaky and uncertain, and fumbled for something to hold on to. Marcus reached out and let her grasp his wrist. "Ma'am," he said. "You're on your way to the hospital. You're safe. Try to stay calm." Her eyelids cracked open just enough for him to see the dull sheen of pain inside them. Her gaze did not quite focus, but it turned toward his voice. Her lips moved. At first no sound came out, then on a thin scrape of air, words. "This wasn't an accident." Marcus leaned closer, his brow furrowing. "Ma'am, you've been in a crash. You need to rest." Her grip tightened as much as it could. Her voice hardly carried over the sounds of the ambulance. "Oliver," she whispered. "He wants me gone." The sentence came out in pieces, like something she had been holding on to for a long time and could only let out now. Marcus felt the words sink into him. Not as a puzzle to solve, that would come later, if at all, but as a small heavy stone of fear. He said quietly, "We'll talk when you're stronger, all right, just focus on breathing." Her hand slipped from his wrist, her eyes closed again. The monitor beside her showed a slightly steadier rhythm now, but it was still fragile. He watched her for the rest of the ride, his mind doing two things at once, tracking her vital signs and tucking away that single name. Oliver. The ER felt both familiar and different when you arrived in the back of an ambulance. Marcus stepped out with the paramedics and moved alongside the stretcher as they wheeled it in. The sliding doors opened with their usual sigh, letting them into bright lights and organized motion. Nurses and techs met them at the entrance to the trauma bay. Someone called out, 42-year-old female rollover MVC, possible head injury, altered mental status. The words bounced from one person to another, each receiving and layering on their own responsibilities. Marcus gave his report to the trauma team, focusing on times, observations, interventions. The woman's name came back to him as he spoke, Madeline Grant, and he saw the flash of recognition in a nurse's eyes. "The Madeline Grant," she murmured to another nurse. "From Grant Innovations, famous or not, treat her the same," the attending doctor snapped gently, and that was that. They worked over her with efficient hands, attaching lines, ordering scans, preparing to move her to imaging as soon as she was stable enough. For a while, Marcus stayed, answering questions, offering details about the crash site. Once the team was fully engaged, he stepped back. He washed his hands in the stainless steel sink just outside the trauma room, scrubbing away soot blood and the faint stinging residue of gasoline. As the water ran over his fingers, he stared down at the basin, watching pink-tinged droplets swirl around the drain. He thought of the way her hand had grabbed his wrist. The look in her pale, unfocused eyes. This wasn't an accident. "Oliver, he wants me gone." He dried his hands slowly with a paper towel, each movement deliberate. In his line of work, people often said things in delirium, snatches of dream, pain, fear. But every now and then, something cut through the fog with too much clarity to ignore. He folded the paper towel in half, then in half again. "You are a doctor," he reminded himself. Not a detective. His first duty was to the body and mind in front of him, not the story surrounding them. He tossed the towel into the trash and turned away from the sink. Two people in plain suits were waiting near the nurse's station, talking quietly with the charge nurse. They stood up straighter as they saw him. One of them, a man in his 50s with gray at his temples, stepped forward and showed a badge. "Dr. Hale?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Detective Warren. This is Detective Ortiz. We're with the county sheriff's office. We're taking the report on the crash on Flagstaff Ridge. We understand you were first on scene." Marcus nodded. "I was driving by when it happened." "Do you have a moment to answer some questions?" Warren asked. "Of course." They moved a little to the side, away from the main flow of foot traffic. The corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and something warm from the staff lounge, maybe soup, maybe reheated leftovers. Monitors beeped in distant rooms. Detective Warren opened a small notebook and clicked his pen. "Can you walk us through what you saw and did from the moment you noticed something was wrong?" Marcus gave them the sequence. He kept it simple and clear: the flash of light, the sound of the impact, stopping his car, the SUV on its side, halfway down the slope, the small fire, the smell of gas, the bystanders who stayed at the rail and did not go down, his climb, the broken window, the jammed seatbelt, the cut, the rescue. Detective Ortiz nodded as she wrote, every now and then glancing up with sharp, attentive eyes. "You said there was a fire before the explosion." "Yes," Marcus said, "at the front of the vehicle. It looked like it started in the engine compartment. Hard to tell exactly. The flames were just starting to spread when I arrived." "And the road conditions?" she asked. "Anything unusual?" "Cold. The sun was going down. There might have been a thin layer of ice in places. I was driving carefully, but I didn't notice any major patches where I was." Warren exchanged a look with his partner. "Our team at the scene found skid marks near the guardrail. It looks like the vehicle lost traction just after a curve. There's gravel on that stretch, and with the temperature drop, there might have been a little ice. The guardrail's torn clean through." Marcus watched their faces, reading the lines of thought there. They were already balancing possibilities: driver error, bad luck, environmental conditions. "We'll know more when we get a closer look at the vehicle," Warren went on. "We'll also be checking the brakes, tires, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's just physics. Sometimes it's something else." "Something else," Marcus repeated quietly. He thought of the word that had floated out of Madeline's mouth like a secret too heavy to hold. Ortiz added, "In our preliminary note we'll probably list loss of control on a slick surface as a likely factor. But we aren't ruling anything out yet. We've had cases where the braking system was tampered with. Those take time to sort out." Marcus hesitated. He weighed the memory of her whisper again. The fatigue, the shock, the pain. All of that could twist a mind. Yet the way she had said it, hoarse, strained but intentional, stuck with him. "Did she say anything?" Warren asked, almost as if he could sense Marcus's thoughts. "At the scene or in the ambulance?" "She was mostly out of it," Marcus said. He chose his words with care. "Disoriented as you'd expect. She said something about it not being an accident. She mentioned a name. Oliver. But it's hard to know how much of that was clear thinking and how much was confusion. She had a head injury." Warren jotted that down. Noted. "Do you know if she has any close associates by that name?" "I know she runs Grant Innovations," Marcus said. "I don't know anyone in her personal circle. I just recognized her from media. That's all." "All right." Warren closed his notebook softly. "Thank you, Doctor. We'll follow up if we need anything else. And good work back there. Not everyone would have gone down that hill." Marcus gave a small nod. "Someone needed help," he said simply. The detectives left, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, looking toward the room where Madeline lay. Behind that door, monitors watched over her, and nurses checked on her, and the machines of medicine hummed and breathed. He felt a familiar tug inside, something between curiosity and concern. "This is not over," a quiet voice in him said. "This is just the beginning of something." He turned away and headed down the hall. His shift had technically ended, and he still needed to change, to go home, to eat something and maybe sleep. Life went on, even for doctors who had climbed down burning hillsides. But the name Oliver stayed with him as he walked. It sat in his mind like a bookmark, marking a page he had not yet read. While Marcus left the hospital, the night settled deeper around the building. In a private room, away from the busiest corridors, Madeline lay in a hospital bed, tucked under a thin blanket. Her head was bandaged where they had cleaned and closed the cut at her temple. A soft collar kept her neck still. Tubes and wires connected her to IV poles and monitors, their quiet beeps and drips marking the slow passage of time. Her breathing was a little clearer now. The meds had settled into her system, smoothing out the sharp edges of pain. She was not fully awake, but not fully gone, either. She floated in a gray space that felt outside of time. In that gray space, the images came back. She saw the glass doors of Grant Innovations closing behind her. The reflection had shown a woman in her early 40s, wearing a tailored coat and carrying a leather briefcase. Her expression had been tired, but controlled. The kind of face people expected from a CEO whose company's stock ticker crawled across the bottom of financial news channels. The lobby had been mostly empty. The rest of the staff had gone home hours earlier. She had stayed late for a meeting with a few board members who wanted updated projections, who wanted reassurance, who wanted to press, gently but firmly, about certain financial anomalies that had appeared in recent reports. The name Northbridge Analytics had been on the screen more than once. A contracted firm. A shell of a company, some suspected, with invoices that looked ordinary at first glance, but kept showing up under different project codes, just below the thresholds that required full board review. Most of those approvals had come through under one name, Oliver Knight, her COO and partner in the company's growth over the last decade. Oliver had been with her almost from the beginning. He had been the one in charge of operations while she focused on vision and product. She had trusted him, delegated to him, praised him. She had signed off on his recommendations more times than she could count, and together they had watched their company grow from a small startup into a giant. Lately though, there had been that soft whisper in her mind. Something is off. Leaving the building, she had checked her phone and found a voice message flagged urgent. Oliver's voice had filled her car as she pulled out of the parking garage. "Maddie, it's Oliver, we need to schedule a special meeting with the rest of the board. Very soon. There are some things we need to talk through. You're going to hear some alarming language from legal and maybe from a couple board members. I want to walk you through it privately first. Call me when you get this." His tone had been polite, but tighter than usual, less smooth. There had been a dryness in it she could not place. She had listened to it twice as she drove, the words replaying in her ears. Why a special meeting, she'd thought. Why now, why not just bring it up today? Her hands had stayed steady on the wheel, but a knot had formed in her stomach. She'd thought about the invoices, the payments, the way Northbridge Analytics kept sliding under the radar. She had thought about shareholders, regulators, lawyers. She had thought about trust. Outside the windshield, the Flagstaff Ridge Road had stretched ahead of her, curving along the mountainside. The sun had already dipped, leaving the sky a washed blue-gray. Her headlights carved out a tunnel of light in front of her. In her memory now, that tunnel of light brightened. Another pair of headlights appeared around a blind curve ahead, coming toward her faster than she expected. They cut straight into her eyes, dazzling her. She remembered squinting, flinching. Her hands had jerked on the wheel, a small instinctive correction to the right. The right side tires had hit a patch that felt different, looser, slicker. She recalled the slight crunch of gravel under rubber, the awful feeling of the car losing its grip. There had likely been a thin sheet of ice there too, invisible in the dim light, waiting for the wrong moment. Her heart had jumped into her throat. She had tried to steer back, to brake lightly, to regain control. Instead the vehicle had skidded sideways. The guardrail had come up fast in her side view. There had been a split second where she thought, it will hold, it has to hold. It did not hold. The impact had been loud and violent. Metal shrieked as the SUV slammed into the rail and forced it outward. She felt the brief resistance, then the sudden give as the rail tore free and the world dropped away. The weightless moment that followed had seemed impossibly long. The nose of the SUV had tipped down. The sky had shifted in the windshield. Her brain had realized what was happening even as her mouth opened on an unfinished cry. Then the first slam against the slope. The second. The third. The vehicle had rolled, hitting rocks, throwing her sideways, then back, then forward. The seatbelt had dug into her chest and shoulder like a fist. The airbag had exploded in front of her, hitting her face and forcing the breath out of her lungs. Glass had burst somewhere near her head, sending tiny stings across her skin. She remembered a deep dull sound from somewhere, maybe her head striking something, maybe the car hitting a larger rock. After that, sounds had blurred and stretched, like listening underwater. She had smelled gasoline. Strong, sour, unmistakable. She had tried to move, but the seatbelt had been too tight. She had tried to turn her head, but pain had shot down her neck. The world had tilted on its side. The steering wheel had been above her, instead of in front of her. She had seen small sparks leap from the crushed front of the SUV. A creeping thought had moved through her foggy brain. This is how it ends, in a fire on a mountainside, alone. Then a different image had risen in her mind. Her son Evan, 14, sitting at the kitchen island at home, wearing his ever-present headphones, face lit by the glow of his laptop screen. He had looked up at her once with a question in his eyes during breakfast, and she had brushed him off with a quick, "Later, honey, I'm running late." She could not even remember what the question had been now. In the hospital bed, her fingers twitched faintly against the sheet. Back in the crash, in her memory, she had heard a voice somewhere outside the broken window. A man's voice calling to her, firm and calm. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She had wanted to answer. She had wanted to tell him. This wasn't an accident, Oliver, but the words had tangled with the smoke in her lungs. The next thing she had known was the sensation of being pulled, dragged, lifted, cold air against her face, the roar of an explosion behind her, a weight pressing over her as something big blew apart, then darkness. In the quiet room now, monitors blinked and the steady soft beeping traced her heart's rhythm one beat at a time. Outside, the night pressed up against the window, cold and indifferent. Inside, life held on. Somewhere else in the city, an ER doctor drove home in a tired car, one hand lightly resting on the wheel, the other on his knee. His mind wandered back to the slope, the fire, the whisper. By the second morning after the crash, the hospital had settled into that steady low hum that sits somewhere between calm and tension. Madeline lay propped against two pillows, the bandage at her temple smaller now, the collar around her neck looser. The worst danger had passed. The doctors were pleased with her scans. There were no major internal injuries, just bruises, a concussion, and a body that had been badly shaken. That was enough for her. Her laptop sat open on the rolling tray in front of her. On the screen, a video conference window showed 3 members of the board and a company lawyer. Their faces were arranged in neat squares, each framed by a home office or a blurred background. "We've already gotten 3 calls from major shareholders," one board member was saying. "They're nervous. The news coverage is tying the accident to the company. We need to show stability." "We will," Madeline replied. Her voice sounded flat in her own ears but firm. "The accident won't change our direction. Just reassure them I'll be back in office soon." The lawyer leaned closer to his camera. "We also need to address timing on this special meeting Oliver requested. He sent an email to the full board this morning. The phrasing suggests urgency." Madeline's jaw tightened. "We'll deal with that after we have all the information. I'm not making any big moves from a hospital bed." Her mind flicked back briefly to the crash. Gravel, headlights, the guardrail breaking. The taste of gasoline. A man's voice near her ear. "You're safe now. Help is on the way." She pushed the memory aside and focused on the numbers on her screen, the lines on the charts, the emails piling up in the corner. Long before she had been lying in a hospital bed, before the sound of rolling carts and soft beeps, her life had followed a different rhythm, one she knew by heart. Most mornings at home started before sunrise. The house where she and Evan lived was large, modern, all clean lines and glass and pale wood. Her day began with coffee and a quick scan of overnight reports. Then a car would take her to the Grant Innovations headquarters, a sleek tower of glass and steel downtown. From there meetings stretched almost without pause, strategy updates, investor calls, product reviews, press interviews. She told herself, again and again, that all of this was for Evan. Evan Grant, 14, lived inside that busy life like a quiet shadow. From Madeline's point of view, Evan was distant. He spoke very little at the dinner table when they actually ate together. He disappeared into his room right after school. He wore his headphones so often that she had started to joke they were glued on. When she walked past his door and saw the glow of his monitor, she'd think, teenagers, they all pull away. He'll grow out of it. She had quietly attached a label to him, rebellious teen, a phase, something to be endured like a rough quarter in business. She never asked herself whether that label was accurate. She never asked herself what might be underneath it. When she missed his school events, those choir performances, the small science fair, the soccer game where he sat on the bench more than he played, she told herself he didn't really care whether she was there or not. On the nights when she sat in the back seat of the company car, staring at emails, and realized it was nearly 10 p.m. and she'd missed dinner again, she would think, he'll understand when he's older. When he sees the house, the schools, the security, he'll know I did it all for him. And then she would go back to reading the next report. Now in the hospital, she closed her laptop for a moment and leaned her head back against the pillow. The room seemed too quiet all of a sudden. "You all right, Miss Grant?" a nurse asked, stepping in to check her IV line. "I'm fine," Madeline said automatically. The nurse smiled a little. "You don't have to be fine every second, you know." Madeline didn't respond. She was thinking of a text her assistant had sent. "Evan knows you're okay. He'll come by later." She felt a small flicker of unease and quickly smothered it. Evan arrived at the hospital late that morning with his backpack slung over one shoulder. He had insisted on carrying it, even though it didn't have much inside. It made him feel less like a stray kid, wandering a grown-up world. He touched the strap of his backpack with nervous fingers, pulling it higher on his shoulder as he walked. He wasn't sure what he expected to see when he reached her room. Maybe he would see her sleeping, pale and fragile, like in the shows. Maybe she would be waiting, arms open, ready to tell him she was sorry for scaring him. He stopped at the large glass window that looked into her room. Instead, he saw her sitting up in bed with her laptop open again, the device perched on the rolling tray. A headset rested on her ears. Several small boxes filled the screen, people on a video call. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard between comments. "It's not just the stock," one of the small faces was saying. "We have to consider liability. The accidents involving high-profile executives can raise questions." Madeline's mouth tightened a little. "We're not going to let one random event define the company's narrative," she replied. "We'll manage communication, we'll show continuity." Evan stood outside the glass, watching. He lifted his hand and rested his fingertips softly on the window for a second, as if that could get her attention. She turned her head, saw him, and gave him a small distracted smile. She pressed a button on her headset. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice faint through the glass, "just give me a few minutes, okay? This is very important." He nodded, though something inside him sagged. She turned back to the call. Her voice shifted back into the tone he'd heard 100 times on television interviews, confident, composed, distant. He waited another minute or two. No one looked up again. The backpack strap bit into his shoulder. He stepped away from the window, one small step at a time, then turned and walked down the hallway in the opposite direction. His movements were slow, like someone moving underwater. His hands hung at his sides. His face was drained of expression, except for the downturned corners of his mouth. He didn't slam doors, he didn't shout, he didn't even sniffle. He just carried his disappointment quietly, the way he had learned to do. Marcus had just finished checking on an elderly patient's chart when he stepped out into the corridor and saw the boy. Marcus watched him walk away from Madeline's room, shoulders slumped, head slightly bowed. There was a tightness around the boy's eyes, a redness that suggested tears held back, not spilled. He'd seen that look many times on the faces of families in waiting rooms. He knew it personally too. He waited until Evan had passed the busier part of the hall and was nearing the quieter wing near the stairwell. Then Marcus followed, his footsteps slow and non-threatening. "Hey," he called gently. "You okay?" Evan stopped, turned, his eyes flashed with something defensive. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why are you following me?" Marcus lifted his hands a little, palms outward. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm Dr. Hale. I was the doctor who found your mom after the crash. I rode with her in the ambulance." Evan blinked, confusion and surprise mixing on his face. You were there." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I pulled her out of the car." For a second Evan seemed unsure how to react. Then the defensive tightness slipped. His gaze dropped, and his voice came out small. "Thank you," he said, "for saving her." The words came out quietly but firmly. He meant them. "You're welcome," Marcus said. He motioned toward a small alcove by the window where 2 chairs sat empty. "Do you want to sit for a minute?" "No pressure. Just thought it might help to rest." Evan hesitated, then followed him. They sat facing each other across a small round table. The window beside them looked out at a row of pine trees in the hospital courtyard. The sky was pale blue. A nurse walked by with a cart, the wheels squeaking faintly, then disappeared around the corner. Evan picked at a loose thread on the edge of his backpack strap. He didn't look up. "So," Marcus said gently, "I saw you at your mom's door just now. Looked like you were hoping to talk to her." Evan made a small humorless sound. "She's busy. She's always busy." "You look disappointed," Marcus said. "It's okay to admit that. It's normal." Evan shrugged. "She's a CEO. She runs this big company. There are always calls and meetings and emergencies. I get it." He said the words like someone repeating something they'd heard many times. "Do you get it?" Marcus asked. "Or is that just what you tell yourself so it doesn't hurt as much?" Evan's fingers stilled on the backpack strap. He swallowed. His eyes stayed on the table. "You don't even know me," he muttered. "That's true," Marcus said. "I don't. But I recognize the look on your face. I used to see it in the mirror when I was your age." Evan's eyes flicked up just for a second. "You did?" "Yeah," Marcus said. He rested his forearms on his knees and leaned forward a little. "I grew up without parents. I was what they call a ward of the state. I lived in a bunch of foster homes, some good, some not so good. I learned early not to expect anyone to show up. Not at school events, not at the hospital, not at birthdays. It does something to you, feeling like you don't matter enough for anyone to care." Evan studied his face, searching for exaggeration or pity. He found neither. Marcus's tone was simple, factual, almost gentle. "I don't tell you that to make you feel bad for me," Marcus said. "I just want you to know I understand that feeling. That ache in your chest when someone you love keeps choosing something else over you." Evan's throat tightened. He looked away again, blinking rapidly. "It's not that she's a monster or anything," he said after a moment. "She's not mean, she buys me stuff. We have this big house. People at school think I'm lucky. They say, 'Your mom is famous. Your life must be so cool.'" He let out a breath that sounded like it had been stuck inside him for a long time. "But she never has time," he went on. "Not really. Almost every birthday she's late, like hours late. For the last one she was in New York. She called in for 5 minutes and then hung up because she had to go into another meeting. I blew out candles in the kitchen with the housekeeper. And she's nice, but she's not my mom." Marcus listened quietly, letting the boy speak. "And at school," Evan added, "I used to tell her about my stuff, my science fair project the time I was in a small play, the soccer games. She always said she'd try to come. But then there was always something, a call, a trip, some urgent thing. After a while, I just stopped telling her. It was easier to pretend I didn't care if she came or not." He swallowed again. "She thinks I'm just a moody teenager," he whispered. "She tells her friends, 'He's in that phase, you know how it is.' Like that explains everything." He lifted his gaze to Marcus's eyes and for the first time his real feelings came out. "I'm not being rebellious," he said. "I'm just tired, and I keep wondering if I mattered more. Maybe she'd try harder. So sometimes I act cold on purpose. I try to see if she will notice, but mostly she just gets annoyed and says she doesn't have time for drama." The last word came out with a bitter little twist. The alcove was quiet for a moment. The hum of the heater under the window filled the gap. Marcus felt something deep inside him ache. The boy's words touched a place that still remembered what it felt like to be small and convinced you were an afterthought. "What you feel makes sense," Marcus said softly. "Anyone in your position would feel the same. Wanting your mom to show up for you doesn't make you dramatic. It makes you human." Evan's shoulders sagged a little, some of the tension leaking out. Just hearing that seemed to loosen something in him. "I keep thinking maybe I'm being selfish," he said. "Like she works so hard for us, for me, she tells me that all the time. Maybe I should just be grateful and shut up." "You're allowed to be grateful and hurt at the same time," Marcus replied. "Those feelings can sit next to each other." Evan looked at him, eyes damp but steady. "You really think so?" he whispered. "I know so," Marcus said. "I lived most of my life wanting anyone to care enough to show up. You have a mom, that's a good thing. But it doesn't erase the pain when she keeps choosing something else. The boy nodded slowly, absorbing this. Marcus reached into his pocket for a pen and pulled a small folded note from his pocket notebook. He wrote his cell number in clear, neat digits and then slid the paper across the table. Here, he said, this is my number. If you ever feel like you're going to burst, or you can't sleep, or you just need someone to listen, call me, or text. You don't need a reason. Evan stared at the paper. For a second his fingers hovered above it, as if afraid it might disappear if he touched it. Then he picked it up, folded it carefully into a small square, and slipped it into the front pocket of his hoodie. I don't know if I'll call, he said, honest as always. That's okay, Marcus answered. Just knowing you're not alone can help. That piece of paper is a little reminder of that. Evan gave a small nod. It wasn't a smile exactly, but some of the heaviness lifted from his eyes. In the days that followed, Madeline improved steadily. The bruises on her ribs turned from deep purple to yellow-green. The bandage on her temple shrank to a narrow strip of gauze. Doctors talked about discharging her soon if she took it easy at home. On the third day she insisted on longer calls with her staff. She propped her laptop on the tray and typed for hours, ignoring the dull ache in her head. Nurses came in to remind her about rest. She nodded and kept typing. The accident had shaken her, but in a strange way, it also made her grip tighter on her work. Somewhere inside her an old fear whispered, if you lose control here, everything will fall apart. So she clung harder. During those same days, Evan drifted in and out of the hospital. Some visits he tried her door and left when he saw her busy. Other visits he just walked the halls, staring at posters on the walls without really seeing them. On one of those nights, well after visiting hours, when the house was quiet and the digital clock in his bedroom glowed 12:37 a.m., he lay in bed with his eyes wide open. The blankets twisted around his legs, and every time he closed his eyes, the image of his mother at the hospital, working instead of looking at him, rose up again, sharper than before. He turned onto his side, then onto his back, unable to settle the restless knot in his chest. He reached for his phone without thinking about it, holding it in both hands the way someone might hold something warm on a cold night. For a long moment he just sat there, thumbs hovering over the screen, fighting the uncertainty that always came before asking for help. Finally, he typed a short message to Marcus, just a few simple words he hoped wouldn't sound foolish. A minute passed, then another. Just when he began to regret sending anything at all, the phone buzzed softly in his hand. Marcus had replied, not with questions or scolding, but with a quiet understanding that felt like someone pulling up a chair beside him. Evan hesitated before writing back, unsure how much he could say. But the longer they talked, the more he found himself opening up. He told Marcus, in small pieces, that he couldn't sleep, that the hospital visit had hurt in ways he hadn't expected, that his mother seemed more focused on her work than on the fact that she had nearly died. Marcus answered each message with patience and gentleness, never rushing him, never asking for more than Evan wanted to give. The doctor shared small parts of his own childhood too, stories that weren't dramatic, just honest, about nights when he had wished for someone to notice he was struggling. Those quiet, steady words made something inside Evan loosen. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he had to pretend he was fine. He didn't feel invisible. By the time he finally drifted toward sleep, the phone rested loosely in his hand, still warm, and the tightness in his chest had eased just enough for him to breathe without hurting. A day later, in the late afternoon, Marcus stepped into Madeline's room for a scheduled check. The shades were half open, letting in a mild light. Her laptop sat on the tray again, lid closed for the moment. She looked tired, small lines carved deeper around her mouth and eyes. "How are we doing today?" he asked, glancing at her chart and the readings on the monitor. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then caught herself and added, "My head is better. Still fuzzy sometimes, but better." He nodded. "That's normal. You went through a lot. The body needs time." She gave a short humorless laugh. "Time is the one thing I never seem to have enough of." He finished checking her blood pressure and pulse, then pulled the stool closer, sitting at eye level with her. "Madeline," he said, "can I talk to you about something that's not strictly medical?" She looked wary. "That sounds ominous." "It's about Evan," he said. Her expression shifted instantly into the one she wore in board meetings, a mix of concern and impatience. "What about him?" He's barely said 2 words to me since I woke up. He just lurks in the doorway or disappears. Teenagers, right? He's in that phase. Marcus watched her carefully. What phase do you think that is? Rebellion, she said. They pull away, they get moody, they act like they don't care about anything. I've read enough to know it's normal. He folded his hands loosely. I've talked with Evan a bit, he said quietly. I don't think what he's feeling is rebellion. I think he's deeply hurt. She stiffened. Hurt? Over what? I've given that boy everything. He has opportunities other kids would dream of. I believe that, Marcus said, and he knows it. He told me you work hard. He told me you provide. He's grateful for that, but he also told me about birthdays you missed, school events you couldn't make, times you said you'd try, and then didn't show up. Her eyes dropped, her fingers twisted in the blanket. He remembers, she asked, almost to herself. Very clearly, Marcus said. He remembers waiting. He remembers pretending it didn't matter when you didn't come. He remembers you telling your friends he's just a moody teenager, and feeling like you didn't see what was really happening. A faint sheen of moisture appeared in her eyes. She blinked hard, but did not look up yet. I'm not repeating his exact words, Marcus added. That part is his to share with you, if he chooses. But I can tell you this, he doesn't hate you. He's not trying to be difficult. He's testing. He's been acting cold to see if you notice, to see if it will make you come closer or push him away. Right now, he thinks work will always win. The room felt very still, even the monitors seemed quieter. Madeline's breathing hitched. She swallowed, her throat working. All this time, she whispered, I thought he understood. I told him I was doing everything for him. I thought he would see that when he was older. Maybe he will, Marcus said, but right now, he's 14. He doesn't care about stock prices or expansion strategies. He cares about whether his mom is in the room when he blows out candles. She lifted a hand and pressed it gently to her eyes for a moment, as if a sudden light had grown too bright. I keep telling myself I'm a good mother because I sacrifice so much, she said softly. I work late, I take the hard meetings, I push through. I thought that meant I was devoted, that I was putting him first in the long run. Marcus's voice stayed soft. Maybe in your mind you were, but in his experience he often comes second, or third, or last, and kids don't live in the long run, they live in today. A tear slid from the corner of her eye. She brushed it away quickly, but another followed, then another. This is the first time anyone has said it to me like this, she murmured. The first time I've really looked at it. She let her hand drop and looked at Marcus, her composure cracked wide open now. I almost died on that mountain, she said. I remember thinking about Evan right before everything went black. I thought, he'll be alone, and I pictured him the way he is lately, quiet, distant. I told myself that if I got another chance, I'd do better. She gave a small bitter laugh through the tears, and then what did I do? The minute I woke up and could move my fingers, I asked for my laptop. You're not the first person to fall back into old habits, Marcus said kindly. It's hard to change when you're scared. Work feels safer than feelings sometimes. She nodded slowly. Tears ran freely now, no longer hidden. I didn't know he was hurting like that, she whispered. I didn't know I was the one hurting him. Marcus felt a lump in his own throat. He saw not the public figure now, not the billionaire CEO, but a mother who had just realized she had been walking past her child's pain for years without meaning to. He stayed quiet, letting her cry. The tears were not dramatic, no sobs shook her shoulders, they were quiet, steady, like a small river finally finding a path. For the first time since the crash, she was not crying because her head throbbed or her ribs ached. She was crying because something inside her had cracked open. When she finally wiped her cheeks, her voice was hoarse but steady. Do you think it's too late? She asked. No, Marcus said, as long as you're both here, it's not too late, but it won't be fixed by buying him something or saying sorry once. It will be fixed by showing up, over and over, even when it's inconvenient. She nodded slowly, absorbing that. Thank you, she said after a moment, for saving my life, and for telling me this. I don't think anyone else would have dared. I'm not here to judge you, Marcus said. I'm here because your son matters, and so do you. I've seen what happens to kids who never get a chance to heal with their parents. I'd like it to be different this time. She looked at him with eyes still wet but clearer now. I want it to be different too, she said. He gave her a small reassuring nod, then stood to leave, giving her a chance to sit with all she had just heard. As he walked out of the room, he passed the window. In the reflection on the glass, he saw his own face layered faintly over hers, and behind that, an image of a teenage boy in a hoodie, gripping a folded piece of paper. When the door clicked shut behind Marcus, the hospital room became impossibly quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a person hear things they have spent years avoiding, thoughts, memories, the steady rush of their own guilt. Madeline sat upright in the bed, though the effort made the muscles in her neck ache. The sunset outside had begun to tint the walls with a faint gold, softening the sharp edges of the machines beside her. For the first time since the accident, she felt the weight of stillness settle over her like a blanket she didn't know how to lift. Now that she was alone, the truth settled fully in her chest. Her son was hurting. Not moody, not rebellious, hurting. She pressed a hand over her mouth, as if the pressure could stop the rise of emotion inside her. It couldn't. The tears she'd held back in front of Marcus returned now, softer than before but deeper, as though they came from a place she hadn't touched in years. She drew in a slow breath and let it out unsteadily. For so long she had believed she was doing everything right. She worked late because she wanted stability for Evan. She boarded planes to chase investments because she wanted to give him a future where he would never have to struggle. She told herself the sacrifices were noble ones, necessary ones. But now she could almost hear a quieter voice whispering beneath all those justifications, "You were never home. You were never present. You were building a life he couldn't enter because you weren't in it with him." Her eyes wandered to the small personal items someone had placed by her bedside: her phone, her purse, a soft sweatshirt Evan had once bought for her at a school fundraiser, still neatly folded. She touched the fabric with trembling fingers. The boy who had given her that sweatshirt had been small then, his hair too long, his front tooth missing. She remembered the way he had run up to her at the fundraiser, holding the item with pride, saying, "I got this for you, it's soft, you like soft things." She hadn't remembered that moment in years. She had forgotten the look on his face. She had forgotten how carefully he had chosen something for her. Now remembering it, she felt something inside her twist. "Where did I go?" she whispered to the empty room. "When did I stop seeing him?" A soft chime sounded as a nurse passed by in the hall, pushing a supply cart. Light footsteps moved past her door. The world went on, unaware of the storm tightening inside her. Madeline leaned back against the pillows, her eyes closing not from pain, but from a kind of grief she had not experienced before. Grief for what she had missed, grief for what she had caused without meaning to, grief for a boy who had stood in her doorway so many times, hoping she would look up. She drew another breath and opened her eyes slowly. This couldn't continue. Something had to change, and the change had to begin with her. After several minutes, she reached for her phone. The movement was slow, deliberate, as though she wasn't entirely sure if she deserved the right to act yet. But she forced herself to pick it up, forced herself to unlock the screen. Dozens of emails waited, board updates, a message from legal, a news alert about the accident, a calendar request for a meeting she wasn't even sure she wanted anymore. Her thumb hovered over all of them. Then, deliberately, she pressed mute notifications. The room felt different instantly, quieter not in sound, but in spirit. She set the phone aside, letting her hand rest on her knee. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable yet, but it felt like truth. It felt like the first breath after being underwater for too long. Another memory rose, this one not as old. Evan, maybe 12, sitting at the dining table with his backpack still on his shoulders, waiting with 2 plates set out. She had been on a call in the kitchen, her laptop open beside the fruit bowl. She had motioned for him to start without her. He hesitated, then nodded and ate alone. At the time she thought nothing of it. Now she felt the memory like a stone sitting cold in her chest. The room seemed to blur at the edges. No more, she thought. I won't do this to him anymore. It wasn't a dramatic vow. It came simply, like a fact discovered too late, but still in time to matter. She would show him, not tell him, that she saw him now. A soft knock came at the door before it eased open. A young nurse stepped inside holding a fresh cup of tea. "Thought this might help you rest," the nurse said kindly. "Long day," Madeline nodded. "Longer than most." The nurse set the cup on the bedside table and offered a sympathetic smile. "If you need anything at all, just press the call button." Madeline thanked her, and when the door closed again she looked at the cup without moving to take it. Her thoughts were in too many places at once, on Evan, on years lost, on what needed to happen next. A question rose quietly inside her: what kind of mother do I want to be tomorrow? She didn't have the full answer yet, but she knew it wasn't the one she had been. Later that night, after the hospital wing had quieted and the hallway lights dimmed, Madeline found herself unable to sleep. The monitor beside her showed steady vital signs, but her mind churned. The accident replayed in fragments: a flash of headlights, the wheel slipping, the helpless descent. But beneath those images was another scene, soft but painful: Evan standing alone outside her hospital door earlier that morning, watching her through the glass without walking in. His shoulders slightly hunched, the faint disappointment on his face, the way he turned away instead of knocking. That was the moment she realized she had already begun losing him before the crash. The accident hadn't created the distance, it had exposed it. She touched her forehead lightly, then let her arm fall back to the bed. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow I start over. But starting over meant facing the truth, not only about Evan, but about Oliver, the company, and the choices she had made while chasing a version of success that had cost her more than she'd understood. Tomorrow she knew she would have to have difficult conversations. With her board, with legal, with Evan, with herself. Across the city, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, a single lamp glowing above him. He held a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking, staring at his phone. Evan hadn't texted tonight, not since the message the night before when the boy had admitted he couldn't sleep. Marcus hoped that meant Evan was resting, or at least not alone with the kind of thoughts he himself had faced as a child. He glanced toward the dark window. His reflection looked tired but steady. He had told Madeline the truth today, a truth that might change the course of her relationship with her son. It felt heavy, but right. He thought of the boy's quiet voice when they had spoken in the hallway. He thought of the way Evan had folded the paper with his number and tucked it away carefully. Marcus hoped the boy knew he meant it, that he would answer if the phone ever rang. As he sat there, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the apartment, Marcus allowed himself one quiet thought: maybe this time a family might heal before it was too late. And though he couldn't know it yet, tomorrow would bring the first true test of that hope. 2 days later, Madeline was discharged from the hospital. The nurse helped her into a soft gray cardigan that Evan had brought earlier that morning. She touched the sleeve for a moment, thinking of the quiet conversation she still owed her son, one she had promised herself she would not delay. She gathered her things slowly, careful of the tenderness in her ribs. When she stepped outside, the air felt colder, clearer, like a reminder that life had given her a second chance. A car from Grant Innovations idled at the curb. Her assistant jumped out, hurrying to open the door. "Everyone's been waiting to hear from you," the assistant said, breathless. "Oliver called another board meeting for this evening. He said it's urgent." Madeline hesitated at the open car door. "I told Evan I'd be home for dinner," she said quietly. Her assistant blinked. "I'll let the board know you'll join remotely." Madeline started to nod, then shook her head. "No, I'll come in. Just keep it brief." The words tasted wrong even as she said them, but old habits tugged at her like heavy ropes. She slid into the car, her heart already sinking. And so instead of driving home, the car took her downtown, to the glass tower, to the boardroom lit too brightly for evening. She told herself she would make it quick. She would still have time to talk to Evan. She would still be home before he worried. She believed it, because she needed to. The meeting did not end quickly. Every time she tried to wrap it up, someone brought a new concern, a new piece of evidence, a new fear about investor backlash. Oliver stood at the head of the conference table, speaking smoothly, confidently, as though he were guiding her decisions for her. He avoided her eyes. Madeline felt time slipping away like sand through her fingers. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. Evan. She ignored it. Just for a minute, she told herself. Then an email flashed on her laptop. Then a legal update. Then Oliver started a new slide deck. By the time she stepped out of the boardroom, the sky outside was fully dark. The building felt empty, hollow. She checked her phone. One missed text from Evan. "Are you still coming home?" Another from an hour later. "It's okay." The second message hurt more than the first. She grabbed her coat, her breath unsteady. "Go home," she told herself. "Go now." But in that same moment, someone from legal caught her in the hallway, asking for a clarification about a contract tied to Northbridge. 5 minutes, she told herself. Just 5 more minutes. Across the city, the consequences of that choice were already unfolding. At home, Evan sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made the shadows feel heavy. He had set out 2 plates earlier, the way he always did when his mother said she would be home for dinner. He had put pizza in the oven because he remembered she used to like it when he was younger. Now the pizza was cold. He checked the time on the microwave, 8:07 p.m. His chest tightened, not with anger, with the hollow ache of being forgotten again. He took out his phone. He didn't want to bother Marcus. He knew Marcus was an adult with his own life, his own work, but the house felt too big, too empty, too quiet. He typed a simple message, "I think she forgot." It didn't take long for the phone to buzz. Marcus didn't respond with questions or disappointment. He responded with warmth. "Do you want to talk for a minute? I'm driving home. I can pull over." Evan hesitated, then pressed call instead. When Marcus answered, his voice was steady, gentle. "Hey kiddo, long day." Evan swallowed hard. She said she'd be home. She promised. She should have kept that promise. Marcus said, not blaming her but not excusing her either. Evan's voice trembled. "I think it's my fault. I think she works so much because I'm not." "Stop," Marcus said softly but firmly. "None of this is your fault." Evan wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie. "I just want her to come home." Marcus exhaled into the receiver. "I know, I'm on my way. I'll swing by, okay, just to check in." "You don't have to." "I want to." The knot in Evan's chest loosened a little. Marcus's kindness always did that. And then a sound broke through the quiet of the house. A soft click, the back door latch. Evan's breath caught. "Marcus," he whispered. "I heard something." "What kind of something?" Marcus asked, voice instantly alert. Like someone just came inside." Marcus's tone tightened but stayed calm. "Evan, listen carefully. Go somewhere safe. Right now. Can you get upstairs?" I think so. I will call the police and I will be there soon." Evan stood, heart pounding so loudly he could hear it in his ears. He moved quietly through the shadowed living room, past the sofa toward the staircase. Behind him, another sound, the distinct shuffle of shoes on tile, slow, searching. He climbed the stairs quickly, trying not to gasp for air, and ducked into the hallway closet upstairs, pulling the door closed softly behind him. Downstairs the intruder moved with deliberate steps, not rushed, not clumsy, searching. The beam of a small flashlight flickered across the kitchen floor, then the dining table, then toward Madeline's home office, the files. The documents she brought home after the board meeting, the ones tied to Oliver. Evan heard drawers open, papers rustle, his breath hitched. He called Marcus back. "Marcus, he's going through Mom's desk." "Okay," Marcus said, voice steady as steel. "Police are on the way. I'm almost there. You're doing great. Just stay put." The intruder closed a drawer. Footsteps angled toward the stairs. Evan pressed a hand over his mouth to stop a sob. Marcus's car turned onto the street just as the intruder reached the landing of the staircase. The house looked wrong. Too dark, too still, the back gate slightly open. His stomach dropped. He didn't wait for permission or protocol. He jumped out of the car, sprinted across the lawn and shoved open the front door. "Police are on their way," he shouted into the house. His voice echoed through the hallway. The intruder froze at the top of the stairs, the flashlight beam jerking slightly. Evan heard Marcus's voice from the closet and felt his entire body sag with relief. The intruder spun toward the stairs, trying to flee down the hallway, but in that same instant, red and blue lights flashed outside. Sirens, doors slamming, voices shouting. The intruder turned back, trapped. 2 officers stormed through the rear door, weapons drawn, hands where we can see them. The man bolted toward the bedroom corridor, but Marcus moved up the stairs quickly, positioning himself halfway up, not blocking the intruder's escape entirely, just slowing him down, forcing him toward the waiting officers. The intruder collided with one officer at the top landing, was wrestled to the ground, and handcuffed in seconds. Evan flung the closet door open and practically fell into Marcus's arms. "I'm right here," Marcus murmured, holding the trembling boy. "You're safe now. You did everything right." Evan's tears soaked the front of Marcus's jacket. 7 minutes later, Madeline's car screeched into the driveway so hard she nearly forgot to put it in park. She ran toward the flashing lights, her coat half unbuttoned, her hospital ID bracelet still on her wrist. "Evan," she shouted, breath breaking. Her son appeared in the doorway beside Marcus, wrapped in a police blanket. When he saw her, his face crumpled, and he ran to her. Madeline dropped to her knees on the walkway, pulling him into her arms so tightly she felt his heartbeat against hers. "I'm here," she whispered over and over, rocking him gently. "I'm here, I'm so sorry. I'm here." She didn't care that her ribs hurt. She didn't care that strangers were watching. She didn't care that she was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Her son clung to her, shaking. And for the first time in years, she didn't let go first. Behind them, Marcus stood quietly on the porch, watching mother and son reunite, relieved, exhausted, and silently grateful he had arrived in time. The night felt colder than before, but between the three of them, something warm had begun to take root. The morning after the break-in arrived with soft, muted light. It filtered through the curtains in quiet stripes, settling over the living room where Evan had fallen asleep curled against his mother's side. Madeline had held him on the sofa long after the police left, unwilling to let go, even for a moment. Now the house was silent, except for the slow rise and fall of Evan's breathing. Madeline didn't sleep. She watched her son instead. The gentle slope of his cheek, the faint tremble still lingering from the night before, the way his hand occasionally twitched, as if reacting to a memory. Her heart ached at the sight. How many years had she missed holding him like this? How many nights had he gone to bed without feeling she was in the house at all? The lamp near the sofa hummed softly in the quiet room. She tucked the blanket closer around him. When he stirred and leaned more heavily against her, something inside her cracked open again. But this time it wasn't grief. It was a kind of fierce love she hadn't allowed herself to feel in far too long. She whispered into his hair, though he was half asleep, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." Later that morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen as officers returned to gather final statements. Marcus sat at the dining table, answering a few remaining questions about the intruder's behavior and how he had found the house open. Evan hovered nearby, staying close, as if afraid someone might take Marcus away too soon. When the officers left, Marcus stood and gave the boy a small reassuring smile. "You did everything right last night," he said. "You stayed calm, you hid, you kept the phone with you, you were brave." Evan shrugged quietly, but his cheeks warmed. "I wasn't brave, I was scared the whole time." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Marcus told him. "It's doing the hard thing while you're scared." The words landed deeper than Evan expected. He nodded, his throat tightening a little. Madeline approached them, still pale but steadier than the night before. Her eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, "for everything. I can't imagine what would have happened if you hadn't come." Marcus shook his head. "I'm just glad I got here when I did." But Madeline wasn't finished. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "I want to do better," she said. "For him. For us. Yesterday showed me how close I came to losing everything that actually matters." Marcus studied her face for a moment, seeing the earnestness there. This wasn't a moment of panic speaking. It was a promise forming, a quiet, disciplined one. "You can do better," he said, "and he's ready for you to try." Madeline swallowed. "I hope so." "You don't have to hope," Marcus replied softly. "Just show up." She nodded, and this time she meant it. Over the next week, change came not with fireworks or grand speeches, but in small, steady ways. Madeline took leave from daily operations at Grant Innovations. The board was startled at first, then concerned, then surprisingly supportive once she explained that she needed time to handle family matters. For the first time in years, she did not offer a long justification. She simply said, "My son needs me." Her calendar, once packed from dawn to dusk, now had long stretches of white space, blank, open, quiet. At first the emptiness unsettled her. She would sit at the dining table with her coffee, tempted to reach for her laptop automatically, but then she would hear footsteps upstairs. Evan waking slowly, and she would be reminded why the quiet mattered. Little by little, she learned to be present. One afternoon, Madeline and Evan walked into a family therapist's office together. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon tea. Soft chairs lined the walls. A bookshelf sat in the corner, full of picture books and journals and small toys meant for little hands. Madeline felt strange sitting there, exposed in a way boardrooms never made her feel. Evan sat beside her, hunched slightly, not sure what to expect. When the therapist finally spoke, she asked simple questions. What hurts? What do you wish the other understood? What can each of you do now, not to erase the past, but to build the future you want? At first the answers came slowly, Evan hesitated. Madeline stumbled, but over a few sessions, the words grew easier. Not perfect, not polished, but real. There were tears sometimes. Evan's first, then Madeline's. There were long pauses, there were small breakthroughs. One day, after Evan admitted quietly, "I just wanted you to see me," Madeline wiped her eyes and said softly, "I do now, and I won't look away again." The therapist nodded gently. "That's a beginning." Healing also came in simpler ways. Madeline created something she called Evan's Hour, 1 full hour every evening without phones, laptops, or distractions. They cooked together sometimes. Other nights they watched old movies or played card games. Once Evan taught her how to play a video game. She lost terribly. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded, and the sound filled the living room like sunlight. And Madeline laughed too, though hers cracked a little in the middle. Each night ended the same way, with a feeling Evan hadn't felt in years. His mother was home, not just in the same house, but with him. During these days, Marcus remained a steady presence in their orbit, not overwhelming, not intrusive, just there when needed. Madeline invited him to join Grant Innovations in a new role, a family wellness advisor, not as a corporate puppet, but to help the company's culture change from the inside. He spoke in small workshops, telling employees about burnout, balance, and the quiet cost of emotional neglect. He used parts of his own childhood not to evoke pity, but to remind people that every child needs someone to show up. His words reached more hearts than he expected. Evan saw Marcus at the office a few times, and each time he grinned, relieved to know the man who had saved him was still close. To Evan, Marcus was no longer the stranger who had climbed down a ravine in the dark to rescue a stranger. He was someone steady, someone trustworthy, something like the uncle he had never had. Meanwhile, the investigation into Oliver and Northbridge came to a necessary close. The auditors found enough irregularities to conclude he had been quietly siphoning company funds through a shell vendor. When confronted with the evidence, Oliver resigned suddenly, avoiding the public fallout, but unable to escape legal consequences. It was a clean ending for a messy situation, handled quickly, quietly, decisively. Madeline did not celebrate. She simply closed the chapter with a calm, sober breath. Her energy was focused elsewhere now, on her son, on what mattered. A few weeks later, when winter began loosening its grip on the foothills, Madeline asked Evan if he wanted to take a walk at Flagstaff Ridge. He hesitated at first, the place where everything had begun, the crash, the smoke, the fear. But then he nodded, so they drove there together on a sunny afternoon. Marcus following behind in his own car. The wind was crisp but gentle, and the snow that clung to the edges of the rocks had begun to melt into thin, sparkling streams. They walked to the overlook where the guardrail had been replaced. A small plaque marked the spot, noting repairs after an accident. Nothing more. Madeline stood with her hands resting lightly on the new rail, looking down at the rugged slope below. "This is where Dr. Hale saved my life," she said softly. Evan looked at Marcus, who smiled faintly and shrugged. "Right place, right time," he said. "No," Madeline said, turning to him. "The right person." Marcus looked down, touched but modest. The three of them stood quietly for a while, letting the wind speak through the pines. A bird circled above, its wings casting a slow-moving shadow across the rocks. Finally Madeline exhaled and said, almost to herself, "That night felt like the end of everything, but it was the beginning of something better." She looked at Evan with a gentle smile, her eyes warm. "A beginning for us," she added. Evan stepped closer, slipping his hand into hers. She squeezed back, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. Marcus watched them, a quiet warmth in his chest, not envy, not longing, just a deep sense of privilege that he had been there at the moment. Their lives began to turn. For a man who had grown up without family, witnessing this healing felt like its own kind of gift. The sun hung low over the ridge, soft golden light, touching their shoulders. No grand speeches, no dramatic music, just three people standing together at the edge of the world, letting the wind carry away what no longer needed to be held. A mother who had returned, a son who was learning to trust again, and a man who believed that kindness, steady, quiet kindness, could change the course of a life.
In the stillness, Madeline closed her eyes for one brief moment and whispered a promise only the mountains heard. "I'm here now," and this time she meant it.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.